Thaddeus. It was just another Tuesday, until a racist cop dragged an innocent black woman out of a store and poured water on her in public, laughing like it was a joke. But what he didn't know was that the woman he just humiliated was the very person who could take his entire badge away. Hey, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe if you believe in justice, because this story is going to leave you speechless. The rain had just stopped when Ava stepped out of the community grocery store on the corner of 5th and Monroe Street. Her hair, pulled into a tight bun, glistened with fresh drizzle. She wore a simple navy trench coat, black gloves, and carried 2 small bags of groceries, mostly soup cans and a carton of almond milk. She moved quietly, keeping her head down, blending in just as she always did. But some people can't help but be noticed. 2 patrol cars were parked by the side of the road, their engines idle, sirens off, but their presence pulsing like a warning. Ava glanced at them briefly and continued walking toward her car, a dusty silver Toyota Camry parked beneath a broken streetlight. She didn't know that one of the officers had already been watching her since she entered the store. He nudged his partner. There she is, been pacing that corner for 20 minutes. Sketchy. You sure she wasn't just waiting for the rain to stop? The other muttered. Doesn't matter. Let's go say hello. The moment Ava placed her bags in the back seat, the red and blue lights flashed behind her, flooding the entire street with artificial tension. She turned slowly as 2 white officers approached, hands resting on their belts. Evening, one said, his voice fake casual. Can I see your ID? For what reason? Ava asked calmly. The officer's smile tightened. Just a standard check. You seem to be loitering outside the store. I was waiting out the rain. The other officer stepped closer. Do you have something to hide? Ava exhaled slowly and reached into her coat. The first officer's hand shot to his holster. Slow, he barked. I'm just getting my wallet, she said, but it didn't matter. The second officer grabbed her wrist and slammed it against the car hood. Her groceries spilled onto the pavement. The almond milk burst open like a white splash of paint. The soup cans rolled into the gutter. Hey, Ava shouted, you're hurting me. Stop resisting, the officer growled. I'm not resisting. Pedestrians across the street froze. A man started recording with his phone. Yo, what's going on? Ava's heart raced. Her arms were pinned behind her. One officer shoved her roughly toward the squad car while the other kept yelling commands. She didn't fight back, not yet. She knew too well what happens when black women get angry in public. Sir, ma'am, she tried again, her voice shaking but steady. Please, you're making a mistake. The first officer opened the back door of the cruiser. You got drugs? You trying to run something through here? No, she said, but it was too late. The cop searched her bag, pulling out nothing but a bottle of vitamin C, a folded magazine, and a pack of gum. Still, the suspicion in his eyes burned hotter. Then it happened. The officer reached for her coat again, yanking it open, and under it was a gleaming badge clipped to her belt. His eyes froze. What the? He leaned in to look. It wasn't just a badge. It was a federal badge. His face drained. He stepped back. No way, he whispered. The second officer, still gripping her wrist, didn't notice. We're gonna have to take you in for questioning. You might want to take your hands off me, Ava said coldly. Or what? He snapped. She slowly turned her face toward him, and that's when the second officer finally saw it too. The badge, the tiny black earpiece tucked in her right ear, and the cold professionalism in her expression. Is this some kind of joke? He stammered. Ava raised an eyebrow. Does it look like I'm laughing? Silence. The first officer took a step back. Who are you? She looked at him long and hard. You're not ready to know, but I suggest you call your supervisor. Now. One of the men fumbled for his radio. Unit 4 requesting immediate on-site supervision. We may have a situation. The man filming on his phone muttered. Oh snap, this just flipped. Ava picked up her groceries off the ground in silence. The bruises on her wrists were already blooming, but her voice didn't waver. Next time, she said softly, ask first. 10 minutes later, the street was swarming with backup. A senior officer pulled up, stepped out, and upon seeing Ava's ID, looked like he wanted to dig a hole and disappear. Everything had changed, but this was only the beginning. The flashing lights of the patrol cars cast eerie shadows on the surrounding buildings. Curious neighbors had begun gathering by the sidewalk, murmuring amongst themselves. The air was thick with confusion, disbelief, and a rising sense of accountability. Ava stood silently beside her car, arms folded tightly. The bruises on her wrist were now clearly visible under the dim streetlights. She hadn't said another word since the supervisor arrived. Her silence spoke louder than any outburst could. Captain Rodriguez, the district supervisor, stared down at the officer who had slammed her against the hood. You laid hands on her without confirming identity? No probable cause? She matched a report of a suspicious, the officer stammered. She was buying Rodriguez snapped. You didn't even check her ID before making physical contact? The other officer spoke up. Sir, we didn't know who she was. She wasn't wearing anything official. Rodriguez turned toward Ava. Ma'am, I'm so sorry for what just happened. I will personally file an internal report. May I have a moment with you? Ava's eyes didn't soften. I'll give you 5 minutes. No more. They stepped aside near a lamppost far enough for a hushed conversation. Rodriguez lowered his voice. Special Agent Walker, I had no idea. That's the problem, Ava cut in. You should have trained your team to treat everyone with respect, not just federal agents. Rodriguez lowered his gaze. You're right. I came to this town under deep cover. My identity was never meant to be public. Now it's compromised. Rodriguez stiffened. You were working a case? Yes, one that just got a lot harder thanks to your officers. At that moment a sleek black SUV pulled up. 2 men in sharp suits stepped out. One of them was tall, clean-shaven, and wore an earpiece. Ava gave a small nod. Ma'am, we've been informed of the incident. We're here to escort you, the taller man said. Rodriguez took a step back as Ava approached the vehicle, but before she entered she turned and looked directly at the 2 officers who had assaulted her. You have no idea who you touched, and you're lucky I'm in control of my temper. The taller officer, Officer Grant, tried to mumble an apology but the words tangled in his throat. Ava climbed into the SUV without another glance. As the vehicle pulled away, Rodriguez shouted, I want both of you in my office. Now. The officers followed reluctantly, shoulders slumped. Meanwhile, inside the SUV, Agent Reddick handed Ava a small dossier. This just came in. The same 2 officers you encountered tonight? They've been on our radar. For what? Suspected involvement in falsified reports, unprovoked stops, possible connections to local militia cells. Ava clenched her jaw. You're telling me I was just assaulted by suspects I was already investigating? Looks that way, Reddick said. Unknowingly they made contact with the exact person they're trying to avoid. The absurdity of it all hit Ava. The mission she had spent 3 months preparing for, endangered by 2 hot-headed men drunk on power. I need every piece of dirt we have on them, every arrest, every complaint filed. You'll have it in the morning. Ava stared out the window. Somewhere out there an entire network was hiding behind badges. Tonight's attack wasn't just personal. It was a clue. She would tear the whole system down. Back at the station, Officer Grant and his partner, Officer Mills, sat stiffly in Rodriguez's office. The mood was ice cold. You're both suspended pending investigation, Rodriguez said. You're suspending us? Over her? Mills blurted. Rodriguez leaned in. Do you know who that woman was? A badge doesn't mean she's innocent, Grant shouted. Rodriguez slammed a folder on the table. That badge outranks every single one in this department. They both fell silent. Rodriguez paced. And do you know what she's doing in our town? She's not here on vacation. She's here investigating corruption. And after tonight, guess who just became suspects? Their faces pale. Mills looked like he was going to be sick. This can't be happening. Grant rubbed his temples. She didn't look like a federal agent. She looked like, say it, Rodriguez growled. Neither spoke. Exactly, Rodriguez growled. Neither spoke. Exactly, Rodriguez said. Now you're in deep. By the next morning the footage had gone viral. Someone had uploaded the incident, from the moment the officers pushed Ava to the ground, to when she revealed her badge. Twitter exploded. Hashtags like, Gent Agent Ava, she had a badge, and racism exposed trended nation. News channels replayed the moment Ava calmly told the officers they weren't ready to know who she really was. The internet dubbed her, the ghost in the trench coat. Across the country debates sparked. What happens when a law enforcement officer attacks someone they think they can get away with, only to discover they messed with the wrong person? But Ava wasn't paying attention to the noise. She was in a quiet hotel room staring at a corkboard, filled with names, timelines, and red string. She added 2 more photos to the board, Grant and Mills. The officers thought their mistake was just roughing up a black woman. They didn't realize they'd just opened a door into something far darker, and Ava was already inside. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of a clock mounted crookedly on the wall. Even the officers in the station, usually loud and careless in their conversations, fell into an odd hush when Officer Crane returned with the elderly black woman. Her coat was damp, her face marked with the bruises of rough handling, yet her eyes held a gaze far too steady for someone supposedly defeated. "Put her in holding," Crane growled. He slammed her ID onto the intake desk. It slid across the scratched surface until it hit the wrist of Officer Kelly, who lifted it with a raised brow. His fingers froze as he looked at the name. His eyes flicked to the woman, then back down again, and something about his posture changed. Crane didn't notice. He turned and marched toward the locker room muttering about paperwork and dumb street scum. The woman hadn't said a word since the arrest, and that silence pressed on the room like fog. "Did you run this?" Kelly asked the intake clerk quietly. "Just about to." The keyboard clattered for a few seconds, then stopped. Kelly, you might want to come see this." 2 clicks later, the screen displayed a document header that read, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Active Field Operation, Level 5 Clearance. Kelly paled. Meanwhile, in the holding cell, the woman sat in the corner, calm, her back straight, her eyes on the flickering camera above the door. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was louder than any protest. Back in the locker room, Crane yanked off his belt, wiping the sweat from his brow. His hands trembled slightly, though he'd never admit it. Something about her stare had gotten to him, like she had already seen through him. He stared at himself in the mirror. "She got lucky," he muttered. "Just another wannabe trying to play the system." Before he could convince himself further, a knock echoed on the metal door. "Crane, Chief wants you, now." He rolled his eyes and followed the voice to the main office. The moment he walked in, he felt it, the shift, the weight in the air. The chief, a broad-shouldered man with thinning hair, didn't look up right away. Instead, he stared at the document on his desk, then at the photo of the woman clipped to it. When he finally met Crane's eyes, his face was pale. "What did you do?" the chief asked, his voice quiet but heavy. Crane squinted. "She resisted. I subdued her." "You laid hands on her?" "She was aggressive. She had no ID on her." The chief held up a copy of the ID that Crane had slammed earlier. It had the Homeland Security emblem printed into the corner. Real, untampered, not forged. "Do you know who that is, Crane?" Crane stepped back. "She's a plant," he said quickly. "They use those types of tricks, probably trying to set us up." The chief dropped the folder. "Her name is Amani Cross. She is an undercover federal agent. She was assigned to investigate misconduct within our department." Crane's throat went dry. "What you did," the chief said slowly, "has already been reported." Her microphone was live. Her camera was streaming. "Every word, every push, every drop of water you threw on her, it's all recorded." A crash echoed down the hallway as an officer tripped over a chair. Whispers traveled fast in stations like this. In the holding cell, Amani adjusted her cuffs, just slightly. Not to loosen them, she could do that anytime she pleased. But as a signal, a low-frequency buzz triggered in her earpiece. Backup was already on its way. Crane stood frozen. "You're suspending me?" he asked, voice cracking. "I'm doing more than that," the chief replied. "But I suggest you wait here. The people who want to speak to you, they're not interested in departmental policy." Before Crane could argue, the door opened, and 2 federal agents stepped in. Suits sharp, eyes unreadable. The taller one nodded toward Amani's file. "We'll take it from here." As they moved toward the holding cell, one officer whispered to another, "We messed up, bad." But no one knew yet just how deep this went. Tires screeched as the police SUV turned the corner of Holloway Avenue, its engine roaring through the night. Inside, Officer Clay was fuming. The more people around the precinct whispered about the woman, the more his ego burned. He'd heard murmurs from dispatch that Internal Affairs had opened a file with her name in it, but not as a suspect, as a supervisor. That made no sense. He gripped the wheel tighter. "This isn't over," he muttered. Back at the diner, Amina sat in a small booth sipping tea. A news crew had caught the tail end of the confrontation and was already posting clips online. Her phone buzzed constantly, but she ignored it. The past 3 hours had moved fast. Hospital checkups, a barrage of questions from curious bystanders, and even an off-the-record visit from a state senator who recognized her. But Amina's focus was on one thing: keeping calm. For now, 3 blocks away, Clay stood in front of a dim apartment building. He knocked once, then again harder. A man opened the door, a bulky figure in a sleeveless shirt with tattoos curling around his arms. "You said you wanted help, officer," the man grunted. "I want to make sure that woman doesn't ruin my career," Clay growled. "You said you had dirt. Prove it," the man smirked. "Only if you're ready to pay." Meanwhile, Amina was making her own move. She returned to her office at the Department of Justice, where she quietly resumed her internal investigation. On her desk lay a thick folder filled with reports, all tied to a corrupted web of local officers and city officials, including one named Clay Dawson. She had stayed quiet for months, waiting for the moment they would expose themselves. Her phone rang. It was Darnell, her younger brother, and an FBI cybercrime analyst. "Sis, I ran that trace you asked. Clay's been talking to some shady name. One of them's on our national list for organized crime associates. Want me to move?" "Not yet," she replied. "Let them get comfortable. When the curtain drops, I want all of them in the spotlight." Clay returned to his patrol route like nothing happened. But he was on edge. The man he'd met, known in underground circles as Ripper, demanded payment in bitcoins. Worse, Ripper had hinted at setting up a staged incident that would frame Amina. The plan: a late-night anonymous tip about Amina being involved in a crime. Body cam off. No backup. Just Clay, a lie, and a woman he thought he could silence. But Amina had already intercepted the messages. Her tech team tracked everything. And now, she was letting the clock tick, letting them walk right into her carefully laid net. At the station, Clay was growing paranoid. Other officers began avoiding him, side-eyeing his every move. Someone had left a sticky note on his locker. "She knows." By morning, an internal memo was sent across law enforcement agencies statewide. Initiated by the Department of Justice, a special task force would soon arrive to investigate racial profiling and unlawful misconduct. Clay's captain called him into his office. "What exactly happened with Miss King that night?" the captain asked. "Nothing out of line," Clay lied. "She was being aggressive. Fun. Her medical reports say otherwise. So do 4 video angles and 10 witnesses." Clay's stomach sank. Back in her private home, Amina stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her sleek gray suit. Her eyes were calm, focused. She wasn't just a name on paper anymore. She was the force behind the scenes, armed with truth, silence, and a plan years in the making. By the time the sun rose over Broward County, the storm had already begun. It started with an anonymous tip to the news. Then, a leak to 3 major outlets. By mid-morning, justice for Amina was trending across social media. News anchors called it a civil rights firestorm. Body cam footage, once buried, was now everywhere, showing in high definition the assault Officer Clay had denied. The nation was watching. But Amina King wasn't watching from a screen. She stood at the center of it, inside a packed City Hall press chamber. Cameras flashed as she stepped up to the podium. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "My name is Amina King. I am a civil rights attorney, a former military legal advisor, and I serve as the Deputy Director of the Department of Justice's Police Oversight Division. For years I have worked behind the scenes to uncover patterns of racial abuse hidden within our justice system. Last week I was assaulted by a man who wore a badge not to protect, but to control. That man's name is Officer Clay Dawson." Gasps erupted from the room. In a nearby precinct office, Clay stared at the live stream in disbelief. Behind him, his captain and 2 federal agents entered. "Clay Dawson," one agent said, flashing a badge. "You are under arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and tampering with evidence." Clay stammered, No, this is a setup," but the agent cut him off. "You set yourself up." Handcuffed and disgraced, Clay was escorted out through the back exit, ironically the same alley where he once dragged Amina. Back at City Hall, Amina had just finished speaking when a young girl in the crowd raised her hand. "Miss King, why didn't you tell everyone who you were that night?" Amina smiled gently. "Because respect shouldn't depend on your title. It should be the default." The crowd erupted into applause. Later that evening, she sat quietly on the steps of her home. Darnell joined her, tossing her a soda. "I told you not to let them test you," he said with a grin. She laughed softly. "Sometimes they need to." From that day forward, changes rippled through the city. Investigations were reopened. Officers were retrained. New leaders were elected, and at the heart of it all stood a black woman. Once assaulted, now unstoppable. Because when you try to break someone who's already built herself from pain, all you do is sharpen her power.